The Starfield DLC just released, but the game is in more trouble than ever. Now, I do want to preface this video with Starfield is a single player game, so player counts are going to continuously go down for a single player game as people finish the game. But when a DLC normally releases, you see a much bigger resurgence, at least a 20% player base resurgence when people are coming back into the game to experience it for another time, to experience the updates, the new content, or the improvements that a studio is putting into the game. Now, these are Steam numbers. Most of the people are playing this on Xbox and Xbox Game Pass on PC. However, you can always use these Steam numbers, probably 90% of the time at least, to also see the same trend on all of these other platforms as well. If a lot of people aren't coming back and playing the game on Steam, people are probably not coming back and playing the game as well on Xbox. It's probably going to be a very similar percentage of people coming back and playing the game. Now, this also is a weekday. If we go up into this weekend, maybe a lot more people start playing the game, but I'm not expecting it to be that much more of a resurgence just because it's this weekend than it will be during this week. But remember, a lot of people already had this DLC, and they got this DLC when they originally pre-ordered and bought Starfield to play in the early access. So regardless, you would expect some of these people to at least come back and try it out. And maybe some did, but definitely not a lot, and definitely not a lot considering what we've seen from bumps in other games, which we'll get to in a little bit. So let's take it back a little bit. When Starfield first released, it was Bethesda's fastest selling game of all time, and that doesn't even include all of the people who jumped on and played this game on Game Pass. Everybody, whether you had played a game from Bethesda before or you hadn't, was excited to jump into a brand new setting utilizing a hopefully innovative formula from Skyrim, Fallout 4, etc., and playing a game in this brand new setting aside from the fantasy setting and aside from the post-apocalyptic setting of Fallout. But what ended up happening when Starfield initially released is players were exposed to the same exact stale formula that had not been innovated on in years and years and years, almost a decade at this point, since Fallout 4. And on top of this, it was so obvious that the creation engine, the engine they used to build Starfield, is the oldest, most piece of shit engine for the game they were trying to make possible. And you can see this in the 8,000 load screens a minute that you had to go through that were very long, even on high-end PCs and the higher-end consoles, that completely ruined the immersion for the game. There was a loading screen for pretty much every single door in the game, for going in your ship, for getting out of your ship, for getting out of your ship, then going into another door to get into a space station that you docked your ship on. You literally couldn't go anywhere without a loading screen. And this is a complete issue of the engine that they even confirmed themselves. This is an engine issue. And that's not even to mention the story points of the game. Bethesda is known for making the most immersive worlds in almost all of gaming. But what ended up happening when Starfield released was a complete snooze fest of a main storyline. There were a couple side storylines that were relatively cool, but overall it was so boring and it was so obvious that they did not really know what to do with this game and how to build it out in the same way they created the universes of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. And lastly, something I don't really see a lot of people talking about is the game just, in my opinion, it wasn't mature enough for what they were kind of putting out there and presenting. You have a city like Neon, and then you have a quote-unquote strip club in there with literal people dancing in alien costumes, and they're all taking drugs called Aurora. I don't know, it just seemed like I was walking in a Disney cartoon dance bouncy house. Like, that's what it felt like. And if you look at a game like Phantom Liberty, or even before Phantom Liberty, the original Cyberpunk, of course, after it got fixed, that game had a ton of issues itself, you were so much more immersed into the world because it didn't have all these loading screens. It had characters that had very good depth to them, very interesting storylines, and everything that they presented into the game, when you went up and saw that firsthand in the game, it was brutal, it was gritty, it made sense for the world and how they presented the world. It delivered on everything that, you know, the different characters were warning you about or anything like that. It delivered on those experiences. But getting away from the launch, I know most people have experienced the game and know what the launch was like of Starfield. But now we got to get to the DLC. And I think a lot of the issues in the original game of Starfield were so bad that people just aren't interested in going back into Starfield for the DLC, and that is a huge problem that Bethesda is going to have to deal with going forward. So now, getting to the Shattered Space DLC, despite people already having this DLC for the most part, there's nothing here that is worth $30 at all. I'm sorry to say, it is another lackluster experience. There is no way we waited an entire year, over a year, for a DLC that feels like it has less content than the entirety of other DLCs like Far Harbor and Nuka Town, which both released within a 1-year period for Fallout 4. There's not really a lot of new enemies. The only really enemies that are new just teleport. That's pretty much all there is new to them. You're picking up the same pieces of armor and the same pieces of guns for the most part that you've already had in the base game. A lot of them aren't even as good as the ones that you have in the base game. And despite the inclusion of the rover and the inclusion of maps, they finally have maps in the game, it's not fun going and getting the same quest lines from the same people within a city and then going out and doing those quest lines with not a ton of different side content, but regardless, you're always coming back to the same people over and over and over. These people don't have great dialogue. It still seems very monotone, and all around it's just more Starfield that you probably didn't like in the first place. The only big feedback it feels like they took at all when making this DLC is that they wanted to make a more handcrafted, non-procedural kind of type of game, and I can definitely appreciate that. But everything else about the expansion, it's just not good. But what's next for Starfield? Because if we look at the player numbers right now, the player numbers have not really gone up since this DLC dropped. But when we look at other DLCs like Cyberpunk, for example, which was another game that launched and was horrible at launch. Look what the DLC did for Cyberpunk. For Elden Ring, a game that came out and everybody actually enjoyed and had fun playing that game and wanted to experience more of that game. Look what happened when that DLC released. So there's a game that ruined their reputation, but not fully because people trusted the studio. And then another game that when it came out, built its own reputation around the game of being a great game and people wanted to experience more. And Starfield hasn't done either of that because you have Bethesda, who has kind of been ruining their entire reputation over the last 10 years, as well as delivering a mediocre product. Guys, Starfield didn't even have a map when it released. It didn't even have maps. You had main cities that didn't have maps, so you didn't even know where to go. And there was another DLC planned for 2025. And Todd Howard has specifically said, Todd Howard, the GOAT, right? The GOAT, the greatest, the God gamer, the God developer. Todd Howard has specifically stated that the upcoming DLCs for this game, the Shattered Space DLC and the next one coming in 2025, are going to address a lot of the downfalls that people expressed with the original game. But all in all, I just want to say I'm a huge Bethesda fan. The experience I had as a kid playing Oblivion, playing Skyrim, going back and playing Morrowind and Daggerfall, Fallout 3, and even Fallout 4, even though a lot of people do say it's mediocre, I agree it's not as good as some of their other games, but I had a ton of fun playing it. I had a ton of fun playing their other games, and they developed me as a gamer and who I am in the games that I love today. And I know and I want Bethesda to make a game that's going to fulfill players the way some of their old games did. And they're probably too big to fail. They're part of Microsoft now. They're a much bigger studio that has to go through much bigger loopholes. But guys, they need to make something happen here, man. They need to make something happen with their next game, or Bethesda, they're probably done. I think they have one chance left. And everybody says, they have one chance, they have one chance, they have one chance. And they keep having more chances. I get that. But in my opinion, at least for me personally, they have one chance left before I just stop buying their games altogether and stop having any faith in them. Because I do have a shred of faith because of the nostalgia that I have for all of those old games that released. I think what Bethesda needs to do is, number one, they need to get rid of this creation engine. They need a new engine. This engine cannot support the games that they're trying to make. On top of that, they need developers who understand the maturity of the concepts that they put in their game, so when you actually experience those concepts in the game, it can deliver and immerse you into the world. They need writers who can write storylines with branching paths So when you play the game, they need to develop the game around those branching paths so you as a player can actually have consequence in the game. I'm not talking about persuasion and diplomacy and those different type of things that change maybe one part of a quest line, but everything still ends up the same. You know, the end of the quest ends up the same, but you get there a little bit quicker. I don't want fast tracks. I don't want to skip the game. I want to play the game differently and have different consequences and have those skills for your character actually matter. When I walk into a city after beating probably the biggest boss in the whole universe and saving the fucking world, I want people to recognize that. I want NPCs to come up to me and recognize that. I need the world ever changing as I'm playing the game, because when I was playing these old games, you could see a lot of that in there. However, this is 15 years in the future now. They need to innovate upon their formula. They need to make it more immersive, they need to make it better, and they need to get a completely new engine and developers as well who understand all of these different aspects of making a game a good game. If you look at Baldur's Gate 3, why can we not have those RPG aspects in a Bethesda game? It doesn't make sense. If they can do it, you can do it. You're a much bigger studio with a lot more money. Make it happen. And if you don't, it's over for Bethesda. It's GG's. Thank you guys for watching the video. Please comment down below what you guys actually think about all of this. What do you think about the DLC being lackluster? Do you think it is lackluster? Do you think it's worth $30? Did you get it when the pre-order already happened and then you just wanted to hop back in and play it? Are you even interested in going back and play it? Please let me know all of this down in the comments. Like the video if you like the video, and subscribe for more type of content just like this. We have passed 250 subscribers, which it's honestly crazy just to think that there's that many people watching me. So thank you guys so much. I love you guys. Yeah, peace.